and I saw a play. So she asked me to come to the Mount Pilot Ladies Literary League and tell you the story. So here I am. That play was one of them classical plays. It was written by a fellow named Shakespeare. It was called Hamlet, named after the young fellow that appears first in the play. Now, it was a pretty good play, but they don't speak English quite as we do here. Now, let's see. Hamlet lived in an old castle where his daddy ruled over the land. Now, he lived there with his mama and daddy and a fellow named Claudius, who was his uncle on his daddy's side of the family. Now, before the play even opened, this fellow Claudius plotted and killed Hamlet's daddy and installed himself on the throne, and then he married Hamlet's mother, making him his stepdaddy. Do try to remember all this, because you will need it later on. Now, also living there was a fellow named Polonius, who he was kind of advisor to the king. And there was also Horatio, a buddy of Hamlet, and there was this young lady, Ophelia. She was just visiting. Ophelia was Hamlet's sweetheart. He met her at the BYF. There were all sorts of maids, soldiers, stable boys, and stuff like that there, you know. And remember, before the play even opened, Hamlet's daddy is already dead. Now, when it opens, there are these two sort of soldiers standing there, and this ghost comes upon them. One of them says, "Hark!" And then they both say, "Hark!" You know, they said hark a lot back in those days. So the first soldier says, "Hark! What thing is this I see before me?" And then he says to the other, "Let us flee and seek out young Hamlet, for behold, it bears a visage unto his father." And it did too. It looked just like his daddy. You couldn't have a better picture if you took it yourself. So they went on to the castle to get Hamlet, and he had just gotten home from high school, and he was tired, and he wanted to take a nap. But when they told him about it, he put his breeches back on, and he went on outdoors. And when he got there, that ghost started talking to him and says, "Behold, Hamlet, look on me, for I am the ghost of thy father." Then it went on to tell him how Claudius plotted to kill his father, like I was telling you earlier. And while the ghost was talking to Hamlet, he made him swear to get vengeance on his former uncle and present stepdaddy, Claudius. And after Hamlet sweared it, the ghost went off, and he never seen it again. And it was right there that Hamlet gives the soliloquy about being or not being. Well, for them that don't know, a soliloquy is kind of a self-talk, where you look and you just sit, you look out way off in the distance, and you talk to yourself. Well, that's what he was doing, only he wasn't sitting down, he was walking. And he come upon this young girl, Ophelia. And he says to himself, "Soft, I see Ophelia fair." Well, he sat down and started talking to her, and he asked her how her daddy was and how her mama was. And while he was talking, he seen a fella run up behind him, and he was under the cedar chest. So Hamlet, he ran up the stairs and down the stairs and tried to catch the fella, and he came back in Ophelia fair, and he was so mad that he hit her on the face and throwed her on the ground. Then he says, "Get thee to the nunnery, for thy face is a vile thing before my eyes." And it was right there that Hamlet first started acting like he wasn't all there. Well, see, he figured that people that plotted and killed his daddy might figure that he wasn't in his right mind and might start talking around him too. but they didn't. One night he was up in his mama's room and telling her good, and he looked over and he saw the curtains rustling, just the least little bit, and he eased out the sword, and he edged over to where that rustling was, and he run the fellow through, and when the fellow fell, he seen that it was Polonius. Remember, I was talking about him earlier? Well, what he does is he picks him up, throws him out the window and into the creek below, and nobody missed him after that. Right after that, this carnival come through. You know, like sideshow, show folk people? And they put on a play exactly the way the murder of the king was committed. And let me tell you, when they got to the part where the king was killed and Hamlet's stepdaddy gets up out of his chair and says, "Whoa! Cease this wild carrying on and evil acting in the palace of the king," and he run them all out of the house. And it was right there that Hamlet first knew that he was going to have to get even with his stepdaddy for killing his own daddy. And it was also right there that Claudius knew that he was going to have to get shut of that boy or he was going to cause no end of trouble. Well, what he done was the next day he put on a big sword fight between Hamlet and another fella, and he gave that other fella a sword with a poison point on it, and he gives a plain sword to Hamlet, and he also has a glass of poison wine for Hamlet to drink just in case he wins the sword fight. So he put up his hands and he said, "Lay on," and so they went back and forth like that. First the other fellow heaved and two, and then Hamlet heaved two, and pretty soon Hamlet got cut on the arm by that poison sword. But he kept fighting harder than he ever did, and he kept backing the other fellow off. And pretty soon he ran him through, and that fellow fell dead on the ground. Hamlet went over to take a drink of that wine, and his mama knowed it was poison, and she drank it herself, and she fell dead. Then Hamlet, with his last breath, went up to Claudius and run him through, and so his stepdaddy, he fell dead. Then Hamlet done all he could do, and he fell dead. Oh. Well, it was a pretty good show. The moral of the story goes like this. I reckon that if you're a fella that's gonna kill a guy, then marry that guy's wife. I guess I'd be extra sure that I wasn't gonna tell his stepson. Thank you so very much. You've been very kind.